So let's talk about moving from reaction to regulation. And what you'll see on this screen is a picture of a knee and a reflex hammer. And I want you to think about a time that you've been to the doctor and the doctor was checking your reflexes. So the doctor would bring out this little reflex hammer and tap you right on the knee and your leg would kick a little. And that was an automatic reflex. Just the tapping of the knee created that movement. Reaction is a little bit like this. There's part of our experience which we're going to react to. Our physiology, as we've already looked at, has this component or this part of it that just reacts. It's part of what happens in a moment. It's not completely under our control. This reaction tends to be pretty short. It's actually what happens after the reaction that's really critical. And it makes the difference between a reaction and a chain reaction, which then has all kinds of follow-on effects. And this can be both, again, individually, our own reaction, or it can be collectively, the reactions of a group or of a team. So let's take a look at the reaction itself. So what you'll see is I've drawn a spiral on the left-hand side of the screen. And this spiral is like the reactive pattern, the chain reaction that gets set in motion. And there are certain characteristics of a chain reaction, and you'll see them listed on the side. We'll start to feel it in the physiology. That's almost that automatic part that we can't always control. We start to notice it though, the physiology is reacting. But then what happens after that is it feels as though the situation is speeding up. It's almost as though time is getting shorter. We also have a sense of lack of control. There's less ability to maneuver. And it can feel automatic. I can't stop this chain reaction. I don't know what to do. And you'll see that I've drawn a little eyeball in the top left where if we can start to observe this chain reaction process happening, then we can begin to catch it at its earliest stages, right after that moment that we first react. And that's what this next slide demonstrates. One of the most powerful mnemonics that I can give you for starting to develop this regulation muscle is the stop mnemonic. And you'll see that I've drawn a stop sign on this slide. And each of the letters on the stop sign stand for a different part of the regulation process. So the S, slow down just a little bit. Take a breath. And in particular, notice the exhale. This helps the physiology. It actually starts to slow us down. It's that parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. O, observe the body. What's happening in the body? Can you feel the residue of that initial reaction? And actually, by observing it, you're breaking the chain reaction. And then finally, P, consider possibilities. If you were acting from your highest potential, if you were acting with the full support of your team or your leadership, if you were acting with complete kindness or complete compassion, how would you respond to this situation? If you were acting as though your role model was acting, how might you respond? And if you just consider the possibilities, not even act from them, that will shift the reaction. You will move into the responding or into the regulation. It changes the pattern just by considering the possibilities. So then on this next slide, you'll see these two different patterns put together. On the one hand, in red, you'll see the reaction pattern, which starts out as that first reaction and moves into the chain reaction, spirals down quickly. And it takes a lot more energy to come out the further you go down into this chain reaction. On the opposite side, you'll see a spiral moving in the exact opposite direction. And this is the regulation cycle. So that you start to move out of the reacting and you start to feel that sense of possibility. There's more expansiveness, there's more options, there's a wider view, there's greater perspective. And notice that they're moving in different directions. So let's take a deeper dive into this reaction loop. And what I've done is I've drawn that same model that we started with before around intention, attention, and attitude, but I've relanguaged it here in terms of a reaction loop. So with this chain reaction process, we start out being unintentional. It just happens. We're not even intending to react, but we do. And once the chain reaction starts, our attention gets very narrow. We start to notice what is going wrong, what's immediately in front of us, what are all the things that aren't working. And then from that narrow attention, it feeds into the attitude. And that attitude is one that's judgmental, self-limiting, often critical of ourselves or others or our team or our leadership. And then that feeds back again into that unintentionality. So then we move deeper and deeper into this chain reaction vortex or this loop or cycle. And this is the excessive reaction. It's out of proportion. Let's take a look at the regulation. So in the regulation, we start out by being intentional. First off, about noticing the triggers. So you've looked at those stress constellations. And when you start to notice the triggers of those stress constellations, then you naturally will move into a broader attention, noticing a wider perspective. Oh, I'm triggered right now. I can feel what's happening in my body. And you start to notice everything else that's happening around you. And then from this broader attention, you can move into the supportive attitude, one that is curious, that's friendly, that's open, that's compassionate, that's kind. And that open attitude then feeds back into the intentionality about actually responding rather than reacting, shifting the experience. Even if nothing changes in the external environment, your own internal experience changes. And so this creates a loop that goes in the opposite direction. It takes us out of the spiral. Again, it's a more expansive process. So this is the difference between regulation and reaction.